And we need to move forward, Bichachi, because of time. And no. In fact, I want us to sort of attach that with what we're seeing. British Prime Minister Theresa May, one of the things that they've signed is the aspect of they will help Kenya, especially when it comes to cooperating and fighting the issue of graft, given how the corrupt individuals stash money abroad, UK being one of the places. And maybe, Mark, you can have this one because I can see you're almost about to get out of your seat. But my question would be then, fine, we have signed deals and we say that Britain will help Kenya when it comes to fighting corruption from their end to see what they can do in terms of bringing back the money home. But how? How will they do it? How will this happen?
First, Kenyans need to understand that we can't have our cake and eat it too. On one side, we say the government is doing nothing. If someone is arrested, that's not something we need to see them jailed. Then on the other side, the same panelists are saying that being arrested is actually detrimental to the person. Can we make up our minds? That's one. Two, the fact of the matter is this, that the flight of corrupt money out of this country has been precedented over many years. The UK, Switzerland, and many countries across the world have confessed by their own admission that there's billions of Kenyan shillings that were hidden in investments, in bank accounts outside of this country. Some of these cases have already been determined in their own courts of law. There's a Kenya Power case that was determined in the UK. There's a Chicken Gate case concerning IEBC procurement that was determined in the UK, and we need to see those monies being repatriated. Now, that puts an extra challenge on the president and the DCI and the DPP and the Anti-Corruption Commission, in the sense that how is it that a Kenyan case in the UK, there's enough evidence and enough investigatory powers to arraign these people in court, and within a relatively short period of time, see these people actually being charged and be guilty of a corruption that happened in Kenya.
And we also saw the Swiss president here who visited Kenya this year. But Honorable, we know how doable, how easy is it for this money, taxpayers' money that is stashed abroad, to come back and to be brought? How easy is it? Or are we just killing ourselves?
Well, no, it takes commitment, and I'm happy that they have signed it. That's level one, which we all have to appreciate. Now, the other part, which we should do ourselves, these people who have stashed money abroad, they have assets here. Why aren't we freezing their assets and selling them and returning money to the public coffers? Why not? And I hope this can be extended to the Switzerland and even the US, because it's sad, even for those who are looting the public coffer. Why don't you invest in the rural areas where people need industries and all this? Why take your money to abroad and use it there? Some are just taxed there for interest. Nothing more. So let those people bring money back, and let's do it also with other countries. But let us start with freezing the assets of these guys here, right here at home.
All right. Now, Philip Magal,
yes.
Also we saw President Uhuru Kenyatta come back from his trip to United States, where he met Donald Trump. Of course, they met before, but this one was more intimate and more behind the scenes, and Kenya was at the forefront of this. A lot of Trump's remarks is America first, right?
Yes.
Do you think that at the end of the day, even after that meeting that we saw between Trump and Uhuru Kenyatta, that the signings and the agreement that we saw will then be fruitful for Wanjiku and Akinyi?
They should be. And, for me, the biggest win is that it tells you Kenya is one of the countries that everyone is looking up to, especially here in Africa. And other than the bilateral treaties that were entered into for trade and so on and so forth, there's much to be gained by the common mwananchi should we leverage our advantages against the rest of the countries in the world.
Right.
But before I go deep into that, I would like, first of all, to make a rebuttal on what Bichache said before, that we cannot have our cake and eat it. The DPP, number one, is supposed to have regard to the public interest, the interest of the administration of justice, and to avoid the abuse of the court process. Therefore, we need to look at the prosecution of the DCJ in the light of that. And I can tell you, as Kenyans, we can chew gum and cross the road. We will come again to your second question, which was on asset recovery and the bilateral treaties we've entered to with Switzerland and the UK.
Yes.
Number one, I'd like to say we have the Kroll report, which shows that the former president, that is Daniel Moi, and his family stashed away more than 100 billion in foreign countries. And that is where we can start.
And that's the thing. Also, now we're going to see also President Uhuru Kenyatta go to China to meet Xi Jinping alongside other African heads of states.
Yes.
My question then would be, do you see this as the second scramble for Africa? And it may not be what we saw definitely earlier, but in terms of getting Africa's attention, her economic status, whatever we have to give. And the reason why I say this is, well, Merkel was on her trip in Africa. German Chancellor Angela Merkel was just doing the same this week. I think she's now in Nigeria. She was in Senegal when she landed. So we're seeing yet another scrabble on the African continent, and this time round it's from an economic point of view. Yes,
Africa is the virgin land, so to speak. There are so many opportunities. This is where, there are so many opportunities for startups. We have the population, we have the purchasing power, as it were, and more specifically certain countries, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, the up north, where previously the rest of the world had much attention. You could see that they went to war some time back and they're in shambles. Therefore, meaning that, yes, this is crumble for Africa. Trump has come calling, China has come calling, India is coming calling, but then the question is what to do with all that attention.
Okay,
and
Bichachi?
I think the President Uhuru's reaction has been spot on, because he's made it clear that we are not out there for aid. We are not out there to be exploited. We want trade and economic partnership that are mutual and beneficial to us as well.
Okay, Bichachi?
This is not a scramble for Africa. That would mean that Africa is defenseless and directionless. This actually is Africa beginning to claim its stage or its space on the international stage. Why? 80% of the world's resources reside in Africa. With the West and the East cannot exist beyond this point without our resources. What we are doing is we're positioning ourselves as trading partners so that they know that if they're going to get a dime out of Africa, then we're going to get 2 dimes out of the West.
Okay.
And that's the deal that we must do. So it is not a scramble in the sense that we are now selling our birthright for assault.
To some extent, Bichachi, we are. We've seen what was happening to, if I'm not wrong, Senegal. They had to give the entire port back to China because they couldn't pay our loans, plus 15,000 acres of land. Tell me that's not economic slavery.
No, but you see, here's the thing. I'm talking about the Americans and the British and the deals that we've signed with them. Now, I wrote an article and I said China is not shy. If we fail to pay back SGR, they will come back for their money. But this is the critical factor that a lot of Kenyans don't understand. Out of 4.6 trillion shillings in debt, only 500 billion belongs to the Chinese. And I can bet you 500 billion shillings we can pay. The question we have to ask ourselves to keep us from going that direction, to keep Senegal, that could have kept Senegal from going that direction, is 2 simple questions. Are Africans going to continue to be corrupt? Because if we are corrupt, it is not the West that is going to seize us. We are going to seize ourselves in poverty. Number 2, does Africa have plans to develop itself and to get itself out of the poverty?
And that's the
Those
question.
are the 2 questions that the president answered. He said he's fighting corruption, and number 2, he said he's got a plan, which both presidents recognize.
And that's the question, Honorable Wino, when our leaders, not only Kenyan leaders, but our African leaders, when they sit at these high tables and they're making decisions, bilateral talks, millions and billions of Kenyan shillings in projects, do you genuinely think that our politicians, when they sit there, they are fighting and putting Kenya or the African continent first, genuinely?
No, the whole deal in trade with the West or East is a rip-off. Africa have to stand for herself in this manner. Right now, let's start with our country. We export coffee, we export tea, and horticulture. Most of these things, if we were to do a good trade, we would process them right here and sell the final product to them. But what the West and the East does is to take everything and they process it over there and make profit and give you only a drop in the can. Africans are being ripped off. They have to stand for themselves. Even if they flog in China. You look at the deals, look at the SGR, and put it in the market rate. You see how much we have lost to these guys. So we are not doing good for our own citizenship. No. What we should do, even if you are poor, nobody should just come into your house and do whatever you want. You have to stand for what you think you will gain, because Africa, as he says, is the only virgin with raw materials. And these people are for raw materials.
As much as the late Gaddafi's ideologies may not have sat well with everyone, at the end of the day, if there's one thing I think most Africans agreed with him was a united Africa, where before we can even take business to China, should we see how we can do business with Uganda and South Africa, a united Africa, a one-front African bloc, you know? Yes.
That's why we need more of Gaddafi's. You know, he failed.
Not Gaddafi's, but maybe that ideology.
Yeah, he failed.
He wasn't really bad. Libya was better off before
he failed. He failed in that aspect. But you see now, we can't follow the same rate. What we are lacking as South Africa is a united mind of Africans leaders. Because collective bargain is power. Teachers have shown us that. They come together and they say, no, this is
Africans
what we
haven't leveraged on that.
We haven't.
Actually,
it's divide and rule, actually.
The president has been very, very clear in the sense that, number one, we opened our borders to all Africans. Number two, there is the Africa trading bloc that I think almost 20 countries have signed on to so far. So there is an urgency to trade with Africans. Kenya is also aware that our biggest importer of Kenyan goods is Uganda and Tanzania, and these are things that we are already doing. What we need to do as Kenyans is to begin to enlighten ourselves and to understand that what is actually happening right now is the doors not only of the world but of Africa are being opened for Africans and for Kenyans to trade. Now, what needs to happen is, whereas the framework exists, for example, in the Mombasa region, in the East African region, we have a trading bloc already. But the question is, are those blocks being explored? And the stumbling blocks that are there, for example, in Tanzania, when they were catching our chicken and our animals, we need to iron those things out so that Kenya can trade with its partners. And we are best placed because of our port, because of the strength of our currency, because of our education levels in this country, to take over and to do justice to these opportunities, which is why Theresa May visited Nigeria, South Africa, and then Kenya. Very key stop points in her journey.
Magal, my question would be, and I would love for you to be to have the last say. Do you think Africa can actualize this dream where we put each other first, where we are working together? There's that economic bloc, there's open border. Not so long ago, actually, I think it was yesterday, if I'm not wrong, Julius Malema, the economic freedom fighter leader, opposition party in South Africa, was saying, why don't we not even make Swahili the language of the African continent?
African language, which is all welcome, which is all good. Remember, at independence, we were at that point. That is what Nkrumah stood for. That is what many other Pan-Africans stood for. And that is what Jomo Kenyatta didn't stand for. And that is why we are here today where we stand. And that is why I would like to say that even before we look at the regional trading blocs and Africa as a whole, we have to look at ourselves as Kenyans. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror and the kind of leadership that we've bequeathed ourselves. If we have a billion tons of sugar, a billion kgs of sugars imported, when we have farmers in Mumias who cannot afford to pay their children's fees. If you need to have a political connection in order to get a job when you have a master's degree, if counterfeit products are being imported, the other day, I think it's yesterday that I saw that we are importing rice which expired 10 years ago for our own consumption. How do we expect our industries to grow? When we reward mediocrity, when we reward tribalism, how then do we encourage the youth to go to school and gain education?
So we need to work on our house first.
First of all, and that is the only way Theresa May will respect us. That is the only way Uhuru Kenyatta will be able to look Trump into the eyes as he speaks to him in the White House and not at his feet fiddling with his fingers.
All right, gentlemen, this is where we will close off Week in Review. Thank you so much for your time. I've heard Mark Bichachi. He is a communication expert. Honorable Martin Owino, Member of Parliament for the Newark constituency. And my far left, Philip Magal, who is an advocate. Let's take take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll dive and take a look at our stories making headlines on the international front. Plus, remember today is Friday, so what better way to also close off the week by looking at also stories making headlines in terms of the pop culture scene, entertainment. I would love to hear from you. What stories stood out for you this week? So tweet us at KTN News, at Zinzi_K. Let's take that break.